The University of Tampa and the Sykes College of Business combine workplace fundamentals with real-world experience.
I think what's great about this program, they had a personal interest in making sure that I would take the next step in my career, and honestly, I wouldn't be where I am today without those professors. Being able to make those connections with your professors, tailoring your curriculum to dive into the disciplines that you want to grow in, I mean, it's kind of unparalleled.
Our centers and institutes ensure that students learn to succeed locally and globally. These centers prepare students to navigate the nuances of international markets and cultures.
All of the projects that we do are very experiential.
The Sykes Hall of Fame Business Speaker Series brings entrepreneurs and innovators to campus to have in-depth discussions on what it takes to compete.
Welcome. Welcome to the Sykes Hall of Fame Business Speaker Series. I'm Frank Ganadian, Dean of the Sykes College of Business here at the University of Tampa. The College of Business sponsors this outstanding speaker series to enhance awareness of key issues in our economy and innovative strategies for successful leadership in business. Tonight's presentation is titled, Nurturing a Local Business in a Global Environment. It gives us a close-up view of two energetic entrepreneurs and innovative leaders with a vision to transform a well-established business in this globally competitive world. Tonight, we're delighted to have with us James L. Furman, Jr., the president of Furman Motor Company and chairman of the board of Tampa Bay Banking Company, and Oscar J. Horton, the president of Sun State International Trucks, LLC. James L. Furman serves as CEO and president of Furman Motor Company, Incorporated, and its affiliated automobile dealerships, headquartered here in Tampa. It was founded in 1895 by his grandfather, W. Frederick Furman. The Furman family business is ranked one of the largest dealership groups in Florida and in the United States, with more than 1,300 employees and annual sales of $850 million. Mr. Furman is a director and chairman of the Tampa Bay Banking Company and the Bank of Tampa, a former director of the TECO Energy Incorporated and Tampa Electric Company, and chair emeritus of the University of Tampa's Board of Trustees. Oscar J. Horton became president of Sun State International, a full-service commercial transportation organization, in January of 2000. With more than 25 years of experience at International Truck and Engine Corporation, Horton had a proven record of managing organizational change and improving business efficiencies. During his presidency at Sun State International, the company increased its revenue by over 467%. It also improved its profitability, employee morale, and customer satisfaction. In addition to performance improvements, the company has improved its visibility and status through its work in the Tampa Bay area. This turnaround helped Horton and Sun State secure the 2020 American Truck Dealers Dealer of the Year Award. In a few moments, you'll meet both Mr. James Furman and Oscar Horton. But first, we're going to share with you a brief video introducing our guest of honor.
From the time he was a child, James L. Furman, Jr., Jim, has been part of his grandfather's great adventure. He too was a curious young man, hard-working and industrious, with vision and a strong business sense, like his father, Jim Sr. Today, more than 100 years since his grandfather's bicycle shop, there remains a Furman at the helm of the company. As in the generations before him, another proud son followed in his father's footsteps.
Welcome. I'm Jim Furman. I'm CEO of the Furman Automotive Group, a chain of automobile dealerships that's been family-owned since my grandfather, Fred Furman, was in the bicycle business in Tampa in 1895. We've grown to be an organization of about 1,350 employees. Last year we retailed about 25,000 vehicles of different sorts. We are delighted to be longtime members of the community. We like to feel like we give back to it, enjoy being involved in several other things. I chair the board of the Bank of Tampa, which is now a 35-year-old community bank of $2.5 billion. And it's been my pleasure to be the chairman of the board of the University of Tampa, which has been an important part of our family and its interest for a long period of time through a couple of generations. So look forward to being with you tonight. 2020 was certainly a year in which learning how to be a local business in a global economy was full of plenty of lessons. We'll see what they are.
My father was always in business for himself. Certainly, he didn't run a 200-employee company or hundreds of millions of dollars, but I saw him operate in the community, and I saw the respect that he was able to garner. So it's that tone that drove it, and that's a big part of our success. There's been the involvement in the community. We will not survive if we don't find ways to continually, to strongly support the community.
So, as a father did, now does the child. And this is our why statement.
Now it's my pleasure to introduce to the stage moderator Dr. Britt Shirley, Professor of Information and Technology Management here at the University of Tampa, and Mr. James L. Furman, Jr., President of Furman Motor Company and Chairman of the Board of Tampa Bay Banking Company, and Mr. Oscar J. Horton, President of Sun State International Trucks, LLC. Thank you for being here.
I want to start off tonight by thanking Mr. Horton and Mr. Furman for joining us, and I also want to thank those of you who are joining us tonight in Falk Theater, as well as those of you who are joining us remotely by Zoom. And I'm going to start off by asking some questions to each one of our guests, whom we're very happy to have here tonight. And I'm going to alternate back and forth. I'll probably ask you the first question first, Mr. Horton, and then go to you, Mr. Furman, and then I'll probably ask the second one to you first, and then alternate back and forth so that you can do that. For those of you who are watching remotely and those of you who are here in Falk Theater, you do have the opportunity to ask your own questions. Make sure that you do tweet them with the hashtag Sykes, HOF21. And we'll do our best to get to as many of those questions as we can after the presentation is over. So I'll start off with you first, Mr. Horton.
Okay.
First question, both of you are entrepreneurs who have built highly successful businesses. Could each of you take a couple of minutes to share what you think have been the keys to your success?
Thank you, Brett. First, I want to give thanks to God for putting me in a position to be able to do this tonight. He's awarded me with a lot of good friends, a lot of good family, and this is a special occasion that he's allowed me to share some of the things that I've done. You know, I think one of the things that has helped me in terms of success, first place, I think success is a journey. So I'm glad you think I'm there, because I'm not sure that I've accomplished that yet. But one of the things that has been driving success for me has been solid relationships. I wouldn't call all of the people that has helped me along the way mentors, but they're the people I call the solids. These are the people that got your back, that tell you when you're right or wrong, and they have established that for me along the way. I think that's the first thing. I think the next thing that you have to have is the ability to build a team. I knew when I came to Tampa and wanted to get in the dealership business, I did not have the ability to be a one-person startup, got a little bit of capital, My training working at International had allowed me to manage teams, fairly large teams. So I knew I needed something that generated some revenue. Even if it was losing money, we could fix that part. I needed something with a team of employees behind me as well. And I think the next thing you have to have is some patience. My mom used to always quote this phrase, seed, time, and harvest. And it's a biblical quote. But what she means is that you plant the seed early, and then you let it grow, and then you harvest it. And so I've been in the harvesting season here for about the last 10 years, but I had well over 30-something, trying to watch that seed grow. And it's been those three things that I think that's been very helpful in me being able to secure some of the things that I have in terms of the business success.
And I appreciate your modesty. I do think you are a success. And same with you, Mr. Furman. I think you've been successful. What do you think have been the keys to your success?
Well, thank you. I want to go back and discuss what defines success, because particularly in an entrepreneurial adventure, if you're not financially successful, it's the end of the entrepreneurial venture. But if you only are measured by financial success, that I really don't believe is the full measure of a successful entrepreneurship, which leads to a successful business. I have an aversion to mission statements, but yet I'm about to use one. I think that there are certain factors other than bottom line and other than survival, and we as a company have a statement that says, with honesty and integrity, the Furman family of companies provides service, satisfaction, and value to the motoring public in the Florida markets we serve, rewarding careers for our valued employees, a fair return on the investment of our shareholders, and a generous contribution of volunteer time, talent, and financial support to the communities we have served since 1895. So for me, the balance of a successful business, but one that recognizes the worth and value of employees, that honors the customers, that returns an adequate amount to make it worthwhile, but also that encourages the sharing of the resources that you're fortunate enough, most of the time, some of the time, to earn in a way that gives back to the community. Well-rounded is, to me, the mark of success, not just how'd it go last month.
And that's one of the things we try to emphasize to students in our classes, that profits are important, but people are important too. And if you sacrifice the people to make the profits, you're not going to last long as a company.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to start with you with the second question. What do you think are the three most important qualities of a successful entrepreneur?
Well, I'm not sure that I'll either start with three or stop with three, but I would say that having an idea that either you are capable of executing something new and different or capable of doing something that's an existing business in a better and more rewarding way. Then I think you need to assume that the smooth path does not lie ahead, that there will be obstacles and there will be missteps, there will be disappointments, but that those are not intended to keep you from succeeding. They're intended to teach you life lessons that help you to become successful. And so I could use the word perseverance to button that up. So perseverance, and then finally, I'll kind of return to the question of balance. I think you see entrepreneurs who lose their families because they're so focused on success, or they are unsuccessful in living a balanced life one way or another. And it's important to keep the perspective. It's important to learn from your failures. And I assure you that there are many on my road to being whatever success that you would judge that we've been so far.
Yeah, failure doesn't mean that it's the end. It just means you've got something to learn from.
Absolutely.
Okay. How about you, Mr. Horton? What would you say are the three most important qualities of a successful entrepreneur?
Well, one, you have to have an appetite for risk. And here's where I'm coming from with that one. I had a really good career inside of the company I was working with. It was a company that employed more than 50,000 people toward the end of my career. And I had managed to grow up in a small town in southern Arkansas, you know that part of the country, right? And had worked my way to be one of the top 20 or 25 in the company. My best friend in the company was the chairman and CEO of the company. We had grown up in the company together. And I walked in one day and told him I wanted to leave the company to go do something different. And of course, he said, get out of here. We're not doing that. We got a lot of money invested in you, and we want you to stick around. I said, no, I really want to go. And he said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to go in business for myself. I want to be a dealer. He said, well, man, first place, I don't want to embarrass you, but you don't have the money to be a dealer because I've been paying you all this time, and it takes some capital to do that. And I said, well, that's where you come in. I need to put this thing on the Visa card, and when I make some money, we'll pay you back. They didn't quite have a program for that, but we worked out something. But there was a lot of people around me that thought I must be nuts to have a good job, have stock options, have insurance and pension, and to push it all in the middle of the table and go and do it again. So you got to check yourself for risk appetite. Then you have to have clear goals so that you don't confuse the organization. They have to know where you're going and that any road won't get there. Okay, you have to stick to the road. And the third one is you got to have some capital. Right? You've got to have a path that says there's going to be some dark days, and you better have someone that's going to go and help you get through that. Without capital, I just don't know how you weather all of the various storms that you go through as a business person. So.
And as someone who's not an entrepreneur, I would say that that's one of the things that I notice about my colleagues who are entrepreneurs, their willingness to accept risk. Yeah. And the fact that they become serial entrepreneurs. It's not like you run a successful business, sell it, and that's it. You have to get back involved in something else. And that's one of the things I admire about entrepreneurs.
It gets in your blood.
I can imagine it does. Yeah. Next question, which I'll start with you. How important do you think it is to have a mentor in business?
I think mentors are rare. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to come back to mentors, but I did speak a few minutes ago about those people I call the solids, mm-hmm. and you got to have those along the way. I would not be here today without a couple of mentors that took me under their wings and helped me. And I'll tell a quick story. When I got out of college, I was asked to interview with a company by the name of International Harvester. I got to tell you, I didn't even know who International Harvester was. This was in 1974. They flew me to Memphis, Tennessee, and Memphis covered Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Mississippi, and Louisiana. And I keep those 5 states in mind in 1974. Right? The job I was interviewing for was to sell farm equipment and collect on the equipment in the off season. I thought I would go over and interview in the morning and get on a plane and come back, and I was there for 3 days. I talked to everybody that had any level of authority. So the regional vice president called me into his office, and he had a big office, and they smoked a pipe back then, and he lit that pipe and had his chair kind of jacked up so he could look down at me. And he says, Oscar, he said, you've had a good 3 days here. We like you. He said, but I've got to tell you something. He said, because I don't want you to get yourself in trouble. He said, we have not had a lot of luck with African Americans on this job. 1974. I said, that's right. He said, yeah. I said, what's the problem? And he hit that pipe and blew some smoke out over the room. He says, the turnover rate's been pretty high. I said, wow. I said, well, how high was the turnover rate? And he goes, 100%. Yeah, that's what I thought. I said, name was Bob Romer. I said, Mr. Romer, I said, tell me something. How many have you hired? He said, we hired one guy about 10 years ago and he quit. I said, okay. I said, I'm your guy. I'm going to cut the rate in half. Bob Romer became my biggest mentor for the next 10 years. He sent me to every bit of training that he could get me in. He promoted me 3 or 4 times. And then after about 6 years, he came to me one day and he says, hey, if you're going to grow up and be anything in the company, you have to be in the manufacturing side of the business. Anybody can sell, anybody can finance. And he got me promoted into a manufacturing job in Melrose Park, Illinois. Now, that's a mentor. And when I got to Chicago, I worked in the plants, became really good friend with another gentleman by the name of Dan Houston. And Dan and I are friends today, but he took me under his wing. And every time he would get promoted, I would get promoted. And he became chairman and CEO of the company. And he got me here. Now, those are true mentors. That's the reason I tell you they are rare. Okay? So you can't do it without one, I don't believe. Absolutely don't think so.
How about you, Mr. Furman?
Yeah, thank you. I'll be specific as well. I think I've been fortunate to have 2 different kind of mentors because I'm the 3rd generation in a family business. My most in-person mentor was obviously my father, whom I followed into our business. That is a slightly tricky thing because where parents end and business mentors begin can sometimes be a fuzzy line. We generally navigated it pretty well, but he was certainly the automotive component and the use the word balance for yet another time. He was the balanced component because often he would be unable to answer a business question about the car business because he was on his way to the University of Tampa. I was also fortunate to have, and the way in which my relationship with him began, I was in a United Way campaign back in the 70s with H.L. Culbreth, who at that time was the CEO of TECO Energy Tampa Electric Company. And he and I worked together on a United Way campaign, and our relationship as friends, despite some age disparity, our relationship as friends and as community volunteers matured into a relationship that ultimately caused him to invite me to become a relatively young member of his board of directors of what was at that time one of the major and corporate headquartered Tampa, New York Stock Exchange companies, which was a terrific experience. And he and I maintained a relationship until he died. The Chamber of Commerce annually awards H.L. Culbreth Excellence in Leadership Award to someone who meets and follows the sort of legendary way that he conducted himself both as a businessman and a community leader. So I'm privileged to have had both of those men in my life and grateful for their influence.
I think both of you talk about the importance of mentors, and I think you've given some specific examples that I think are helpful. And mentors can help you keep from getting discouraged during the difficult times, but those difficult times and challenges are going to hit. So what would you say has been the biggest challenge that you faced in business, and how did you deal with that challenge?
Well, I started thinking about that when I read the questions, and I wish I could say there was one challenge that stood out above all the others. I've been in a business, one or more businesses in Tampa for over 50 years, and during that period of time, I've seen the Arab oil embargo and 18% prime rates, which made it an interesting time to be a businessman with a single business. I have been part of the period of time in which public companies were beginning to be part of what had previously been privately held automobile dealerships. And we had a very complicated encounter with considering a public offering, which we ultimately didn't do. But there was a relatively sizable amount of stress involved in getting to that decision. I was certainly here in 2008 and 2009 when the Great Recession occurred, and my wife, who's in the audience, can attest to the fact that staring at the ceiling was one of the popular things I did about 3 a.m. And then along the way, there have been challenges that were unexpected. We had a ransomware attack of some significance a little over a year and a half ago. And then, of course, we'll talk about it later, but no one expected to be in the middle of a pandemic. And so I don't know that I can give a weighting to which of those was the biggest challenge. How do you overcome them? Well, I think you overcome them depending on the circumstances. Again, the simple word perseverance. It's hopeful that you have, along the way, tried to create resources to help in that rainy day, to avert the, when the bank calls and says, we need money, it's best not to have the answer be, I don't have any.
Yeah, I can imagine those 18% prime, that 18% prime interest rate was quite a challenge in the automotive industry. I tell my students about how high interest rates were about 40 years ago, and it's almost like they can't believe that interest rates were ever that high.
If you were in them when they were that high, it's hard to believe they're 1% now.
Yeah, if you were that car crazy kid who wanted to buy a car, you couldn't 20% interest rates on a car loan. That's unheard of.
But on my other hat as a banker, it's pretty good.
Oh yeah, bankers love that, and so do people on fixed incomes.
Right.
How about you, Mr. Horton? What would you say has been your biggest challenge?
Two things that comes to mind since I've been in Tampa. When I first got here was actually acceptance from the customers. You know, we don't deal in consumer products. It's business to business. And most of my customers, they don't buy one truck at a time. They buy them in 50s and 100s, and they struggle with, as my dad used to say, thinking that my ice wasn't as cold as the other guy's ice. Okay, so we had to work through that. When I came to Tampa, I was told by the manufacturer that we've got a dealership in Tampa, Florida. They sell about $28 million a year. They lose a couple of bucks every year, but they look good doing it. They got a Jaguar and a Mercedes and a boat, and they play golf 3 or 4 times a week. And what I found out is that was true. We were blowing through money pretty good here. So capital became a real problem. And I want to give props to my cohort here. The Bank of Tampa was one of the people who said, Jim and Jerry and others, that we like what you're doing here. Got the right spirit, got the right focus, and we'll work with you to get through that. So that's back to that capital issue here. We knew what we were doing, we just couldn't catch up fast enough until we got over that hump, and thankful to say today that we do okay. I would say the next biggest thing is just employees. We are in a business that to work on our equipment, we need technicians. We employ a little over 200 people, but well over 60% of those would be technicians in our shops throughout Florida. And we are completely running out of people because the younger people do not want to go into this business, right? I'm going to tell you it's a good business. I've got technicians that will make more than $100,000 a year. But you can't talk a young person into do it. And a lot of the influence comes from their parents because their parents want them to be college graduates. And I think that's admirable, right? College is not for everybody. So that is a real challenge. Now, we have to put in our own training programs. So we probably today got 12 people or so on the payroll that generate absolutely no income, just so that we'll have somebody ready to put into action when one of our employees quit. So.
And that's the type of thing a lot of people don't think about that you have to plan for in a business. You know, the just in case, what's going to happen if this person leaves? Do I have somebody ready to step in that situation?
Right, and they're going to leave.
Yeah. Well, this is something that we alluded to a little bit earlier. How is COVID, or what impact has COVID had on your business?
I want to say this the right way so it doesn't come off, but it's been good for us, okay? The trucking business is an essential business. Most of the people in the audience wouldn't think about it, but if the trucking business was down for a period of 72 hours, we'd probably shut down North America. You think about the fuel that you put in your car every day. You think about the food that you pick up at Publix every day. You think about the clothes you got on your back. You think about any and everything that you touch, somehow, some way along the way, been on the back of a truck. So we've been able to do that this year. We sell trailers also. Hyundai is the manufacturer. You know Hyundai is cars, but they're the world's largest trailer manufacturer. We already sold out for 2021. They do not have any more capacity. Okay, so if we didn't have orders in the system already, it's not going to get any. Trucks are the same way. We've got various models of trucks that the next time we could get one built, if we sold it today, would be September. So it's been good for us. We've been very fortunate in terms of the employee base not catching the virus. You know, we work with people and we tell them do all the right thing. It's hard to social distance in our shops, but we put up all of the invested the money to try to make sure that we can abide by that as best we can. Mm-hmm.
And speaking of social distancing, I will remind everybody that we are 6 feet apart tonight. So,
Yeah, okay.
So we're keeping track of each other and trying to make sure that each other stays safe. So how about you, Mr. Furman?
Well, it was one of those things that I was glad to be wrong about. When March came up and the word pandemic became a part of our vocabulary, we believed that the likely outcome would be that it would be a repeat of that 2008-2009 period of time in which it was rough sledding. Mm-hmm. So we began at that point to organize ourselves, reduce expenses, and be prepared to weather a long winter. A couple of things happened that caused that to be not a bad move because it was a prudent move. But I think several factors occurred. The trend towards travel by Uber and public transportation and inexpensive airlines. When a COVID epidemic was announced, nobody wanted to get in an Uber, nobody wanted to get in an airplane, but people still needed to go places. And suddenly there was a recognition that there was a car in the garage that you didn't really think you needed, but you'd forgotten to get the brakes fixed and you'd forgotten to make sure the tires were good. And so if we're gonna go to Atlanta and visit our aunt, let's go in the car, but we need to either fix it or maybe we'll trade up. And there was some stimulus money that assisted in either of those enterprises. And so surprisingly and gratifyingly, we've had an enormously good 2020 and it's continued into 2021. We have had surprisingly good sales, and the expense control that was early on employed has made the success, you know, the control your expenses, improve your grosses is a kind of a 101 business formula for having a better month. Right. So we're happy to say that. We certainly feel the pain of so many businesses that didn't have that sort of fortune. And there are a lot of folks that are out of work, and ultimately we worry, or at least need to be prepared for the fact that those people may not be able to sustain the kind of retail business. So we always have to be on our toes, but this happens to be one in which we've had a happy ending so far.
And it sounds like planning made a big difference, planning for the worst and then seeing what happens.
Well, yes, and another thing that I would say before I leave that topic is little did we know that COVID would cause the manufacturers to have to shut down and cease production. So there also was a supply issue in that formula that resulted in some pretty good months.
I'll stay with you now. How has globalization affected your industry, and how specifically has it affected your business?
Well, Oscar and I are both in businesses in which, in my case, a number of our products are made in other countries. And for those products that are made in the United States, so many of the parts and components are made in other countries that we are at the risk or at the mercy of that global supply chain. We are, as we sell products that are made by others, we're always at the risk of the quality of design, the quality of execution, the quality of the product, the reliability of the product, and so it's being responsive to not being able to control your product is important, and knowing that there are some of the things that are entirely out of your control exacerbates that. But we also have reasons to, because our businesses, Oscars and mine both, have not only new product that's just been manufactured, but previously owned vehicles and a very important component of service and parts. If you own a vehicle, no matter where it came from and it needs fixing, we're still going to be there to do our best.
That's good. How about you, Mr. Horton? How would you say the globalization, or how would you say it's affected your industry and specifically your business?
Well, somewhere between 80 and 90% of the products I sell come offshore. Okay, I gave you the example of Hyundai trailers. They're in Tijuana, Mexico. 100% of my trailers are built in Tijuana. There's an issue with getting them built, then you got to get them across the line into San Diego, and then you got to get them to Florida. On the truck side, all of my medium-duty trucks, which would be about 70% of my market, maybe 60% of my market, they are built in Escobedo, Mexico, right? The same issue. But it's not like the brand I sell is the only one in that situation. Most of the manufacturers are doing business offshore. And the parts that they come from around the world. Even though it's built in Escobedo, Mexico, they didn't make all the parts in Mexico. We get them from China and we get them from Japan. We have troubles today with some engines that we need something they call a chip in the engine, but we can't get them anymore because they're not able to get them out of offshore, you know. So, and we've gone to this just-in-time inventory. We don't carry a lot of inventory. So once you back up one day and it rolls through the system, you now weeks and months into being able to get that product. And a customer is a funny animal. You know, if I told you that I was going to have your truck 2 weeks from now, and I come back and I tell you the same story I just told you, they don't care. He said, hey, I wouldn't have bought the truck from you if I had told you, if you told me you couldn't get it, I would have purchased from someone else. Now, the truth of the matter is the other guy had the same problem. But then you know what happens? Now we start to talk about price again. You're going to cost me my loads and yada, yada, yada. So it's a battle that we fight every single day. The phone rings about where's my product and where is it? So it's, but it's here to stay.
Right.
It's not going anywhere.
And I think that's one of the things that both of you talk about, the fact that there have been some advantages to it, but you do lose some control as your suppliers become farther afield, and that's one of the things that business people have to deal with, and understand that there are the good side, there's the good side, and there's the bad side too.
Right.
Okay, before we get to any other questions, I just want to remind those of you in the audience and those of you who are watching remotely that if you do want to ask some questions, because I don't want to have all the fun, make sure you tweet it, and you don't have to tweet it to anybody specifically. Just make sure you have the hashtag Sykes, S-Y-K-E-S, HOF 21, Sykes, HOF 21. Okay, I think I left off with you, Mr. Horton, so I'll start off with the next question with you. What role do you think that diversity and inclusion play in making a business successful?
To me, it's a two-part question. One's around employees, and then the other one's around ownership, right? And I can't speak for all of the other dealers because these are privately owned business, so it's a little hard to come about the facts. So let me just talk about Sunstate. I told you we employ a little over 200 people, and the first diversity and inclusion thing you notice is that I own it. So that's 100% diversity and inclusion there. It's just my family and I, and we're in the business. But when I start to look at the employee base, our sales force, which we have salespeople in parts, in service, new truck, used truck, trailer, and all that, is 28% represented by the minority base. Our administration staff is about 32% minority. Our senior sales staff is about 22% minority, and our parts and service business runs about 39% minority. Now, that's been a conscious effort on my part. We don't quite have the Rooney Rule in like they have in pro football, but if we've got an opening, you've got to make sure you don't just bring in your best friend and they get the job. We deliberately go through the process. So that's the piece on that part. Now, let's go to ownership, okay? Let me just, and I got some, so I can be correct here. When I talk about ownership, in North America, when you've got all of the manufacturers, Freightliner, International, Volvo, Mack, there's 2 minority dealers. Now, the truck dealership business has been around for 100 years, maybe, okay? They got 2. They got 2. Now, here's the tricky part about that. And let me just use one manufacturer to make my point. In the truck business last year, there was about 488,000 trucks sold. Now, Jim laughed at those kinds of numbers because cars do tons, but that's a lot of trucks to get through the hoop. The sales for those 488,000 trucks was about $105 billion, right? Just the parts and service business alone for the dealers in North America was north of $40 billion. Now, that's a pretty healthy business. Right? But here's another tricky thing, that in 10 years ago, in 2010, all over, for this one manufacturer that I'm talking about, there was 590 dealer locations 10 years ago. And there was 275 owners. You roll forward 10 years, there's still about 590 locations, but there's 185 owners. 10 years ago, every dealer had to own about 2 locations. Under those numbers, today you got to own about 4. The goal is to get every dealer to own north of 5 to 6 locations. Well, once you do that, you've put a tremendous amount of pressure on the barrier to entry in this business. So you say, well, how are they going to get women and minorities in this business then if you keep squeezing it down to the haves and the have-nots? It's not a dream. We will always have this as a minority-owned business as long as I'm around. I actually have an obligation to make sure that happens. But I also want to figure out a way that how we're going to transition and get others involved. But it's a capital issue, and it's a barrier to entry is there. So we've got a lot of work to do on all fronts because it traditionally has not been a business that was friendly to minorities and women. So.
Yeah, you use the Rooney Rule as an analogy. Right. It's kind of like if the NFL said, okay, we've got 32 teams, but we're going to shrink to 16 teams. Right. In that particular case, it would make it so that there would be fewer opportunities. Right. And so I think that's what you're talking about here. Exactly. And that's something that I think most of us don't realize is a challenge or a barrier to minority ownership in dealerships. Right.
Right. But we have to find a way forward here. These things about diversity and inclusion tend to run in waves. Okay. And to make this work correctly, we got to get out of the running in wave business, and there's some work on everybody's part. I'm not asking anybody to write a check to make this happen here, but I'm concerned that we'll be down to no representation in this industry at the clip it's going at. Because
you're talking about 2 out of 100 and something owners, so that's less than 2%.
And by the way, the other guy that's the owner, he's my friend. I helped him get the dealership. And I say that to say, it's not like you can show up even with money and a well-built resume and have all of the pedigree. That's not the way the industry is structured.
So it's entirely possible that if not for you, there would be no minority ownership.
Well, I don't want to take credit for that. They might have sneaked in one, and I wasn't watching. But no, I'm kidding. I don't. Yeah, yeah, that's been the case so far. So.
But I'd like to just compliment Oscar, because I think Oscar has been a remarkable influence in this community by example, and has been an advocate that has an earned voice, and I admire what he's done. From a pure practical standpoint, on a monthly basis, I review the top 20 salespersons in our organization. And I am delighted to say, and part of it is intentional, part of it is simply a reflection of how diverse our community is. But our top people are United Nations. There are people whose names that I have difficulty pronouncing who are just at the very top of our performers. And I'm so pleased that that does suggest that we are doing a reasonable job of matching who we are with the representation, who we are as a community with the representation of who we are as a company. It's enormously important, and it doesn't happen by accident.
You know, we talk about the importance of diversity in terms of diversity of ideas, diversity of thought, diversity of backgrounds, which is important. But if you're in sales, if you don't have a diverse sales force, it's going to be difficult to attract a diverse group of customers. If you think about it.
Well, I'll just say when I started in the '60s, we had a remarkable revelation that we needed someone who spoke Spanish.
Yeah.
And we've been improving on that ever since.
And that's the same with us. In our parts sales, we saw probably in 1 year a 20% growth in parts sales when our parts salespeople spoke Spanish. You know, I mean, we had guys that just thought if they just talked louder, that would make it work. But we had to get off of that and go and get some real people here that could speak the language. And it's been a real success story for us.
Mr. Furman, looking back at the business opportunities that you've had, are there any that you didn't take that you wish you had taken?
Probably more that I took that I wish I hadn't. Actually, no, I don't look back with regrets on anything that got left unpurchased that ended up being successful. If it was successful for somebody else, you know, it contributed to the world. You can't have it all. It's much better to be selective, to at least try to start by making good decisions. And even when you think you've made good ones, as I said early on in entrepreneurship, part of what you must overcome is those things along the way that didn't happen like you thought. I think there are a couple of kinds of entrepreneurship. One of them is doing something that's new and innovative with an invention, and the other is, you know, doing a traditional business. Presumably, we ought to know how to run an automobile dealership, but I can think of at least a dozen that we've owned that we wish we hadn't, and yet we're supposed to be good at it. But we have more than a dozen that are good, so as long as the balance is on top, press on.
Good. How about you, Mr. Horton?
Well, looking back, I probably should have exited from International a lot sooner than I did. But then I caution about that because I'd learned to run a business on someone else's money. You know, they allowed me to run a foundry business, and I'm not even sure I knew they had a foundry business until they told me I could go over and run it. They called me in one day and said, "We got a perfect job for you. We're going to make you head of labor negotiations." Best part of the learning career that I've ever had, and I'll tell you a quick story about that. At this time, I was working in the manufacturing side of the business, and International had been around then 100 years, maybe 90. And we had a $55 an hour fully loaded labor cost. Competition was at 27, and we couldn't build them twice as fast, right? And we were going broke. So the then chairman of the company, and I had a relationship with him, and he called me and he says, I got a job for you. And tomorrow, we're going to announce that you're the vice president of labor relations for the company worldwide. He said, now here's the problem. He said, we got about 18 months to correct a serious problem we've got in labor. And it's this 55 versus 27. And he said, your job is going to be to get it down to $30 an hour. He said, I think 27 might be gouging the workers, so I don't want to go that low. I said, okay. I said, now let me be sure I understand what you just said. It took 100 years to mess this up. And you think in the next 18 to 24 months, I'm going to get somebody to give up $25 an hour. He said, that's the reason I'm putting you in the job. You grasp complex things quickly. So we did. We set out to do that, and that's where I learned the most. The next 5 years was probably the best learning ground I had to run a business. I understood income statements and balance sheets and ratios and all of that stuff. I didn't have the appreciation for what it takes to take someone from point A to point B and make them turn 180 degrees from where they were. So I stuck around long enough to be able to pick that up. The second thing is, I think I should be more aggressive in terms of maybe acquisitions, more aggressive maybe in terms of partnering with someone that's got a like mind and a like kind of a business and do that. I owe that to myself and to our next generation of the family to make sure that we got a good enough mix of business in the holding company to make it all work. So, yeah.
Interesting that the first part of your answer leads into my next question. Okay. How do you motivate employees to do their best and achieve their full potential?
Well, number one, we pay well, okay? Pay, benefits. Now, we pay well because the competition makes us pay well too, right? You can't get a good technician and pay him $50,000 a year. It's just not going to happen. So we do that piece. The other piece, we want our employees to be very self-sufficient. So we actually teach all of our employees how to read an income statement, how to read a balance sheet, understand cash flow, and understand profit and loss. We hold meetings with all of our employees every quarter just as if we are a public company. We put a plan together, we tell them here's what we're going to do next year. We're not shy about telling people we want to make money. That's why we're here. But I found out, and I learned that in my labor job, that if people understand exactly what you're doing and how to figure it all out, they are a lot more motivated than they are if they just show up every day and somebody give them an assignment. And you'll find it very interesting. We hold this class, and they don't understand what gross margin means, right? Don't understand that. That's not a bad thing. That's why we're teaching the class. But where I knew we had trouble was when I first got here, I wanted to test the waters. And I would get a handful of people together, and I'd start talking about selling one of those new trucks out there. I said, we sell one of those new trucks out there for $100,000. How much gross margin you think we made? Somebody would say 80,000, and somebody would say 50. And so, old man, I know we got trouble now. Because they thought we were making a lot more money than we were. And when we sell one of those big trucks, man, if we get 8-10% gross margin, we cut loose pigeons and set off balloons. I mean, we have a hell of a celebration. That's just not what's in it. So we have to tell them that, look, that truck we sold for $100,000, we actually paid Navistar $93,000 for the vehicle. So we have to teach that, and that's been a big piece of our motivating employees. They look forward to those quarterly meetings and work at asking serious questions. So.
And thank you for mentioning that, and I hope the students are paying attention right now, because the business world doesn't care how much you hate accounting. You still have to know how to read a financial statement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about you, Mr. Furman?
Well, I think Oscar's got a pretty good handle on motivation. I would say that empowerment is important. That I certainly don't want to have somebody think that a decision at every level needs some sort of executive approval. We certainly have a chain of command, and we certainly have a bureaucracy, which hopefully is an efficient bureaucracy. But everyone in it is tasked with doing the right thing, following that mission statement that I referenced early on, and understands that they're accountable, but also understands that if they do it all right, that there's a pretty nice reward at the end of the day. No magic, but honesty, transparency, a sense that we share that mission, not only for profitability, but for the balance part.
Going along with that concept of empowerment, how important do you think it is to empower employees? I mean, you don't necessarily want to empower a salesperson to decide how much they're going to sell a car for, but...
Well, they try to make that decision every day.
Yes, they do. But how important do you think it is?
Again, I simply think that the more empowered a person is who has had an adequate background, who has an understanding of what the job is and what a properly done job is, that the more that that individual can do without feeling like they have to circle back to headquarters, the better they are, the better we are.
Exactly.
Yeah, checks and balances, but let's go.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Mr. Horton? How important do you think empowerment is for employees?
Oh, it's the backbone of our company, because we have too many situations when our salespeople especially are out long after we've locked up the store, right? So we have what we call boundary conditions. We said, hey, you can play inside these lines and you don't have to call anybody. And if you get past that, then you probably better wake somebody up before you make that decision. I don't care how late it is at night. Over time, you go back to this understanding the business. If those salespeople recognize what we were able to get that truck from Navistar for, they know that the rest of that, they've got room to play. And the more margin they get out of it, the more commission they make. Right? Well, they don't. So people learn pretty quick, because the customers that we sell to, they're not exactly buying our truck. And here's what I mean. Our truck is they've got tires on them, they've got windshields on them, they've got steering wheels, they've got the same thing the next guy's truck down the street. What the customer is really buying is Sun State. Am I going to be able to get my truck serviced? Are you going to live up to what you say you're going to do? Are you going to deliver parts for me when I order them within 8 hours? The other thing that they are buying from us is a network across the country. You load juice on a truck in Auburndale, Florida, it's headed to California, it goes down in Arizona. They want to know that when they drive into that repair shop in Arizona, they're going to look and feel just like they were at Sun State International. So there's a whole lot going into our sales. So price is not necessarily what's going to drive the decision. So they have plenty of room in there to make good decisions and good margins on it. Okay.
I'm going to change things up a little bit now. You're a transplant, as am I. What do you think makes Tampa a great place to run a business?
Well, obviously the weather is good. If you don't believe that, just be in Houston or Chicago or some of those places these days. But for me, it's a very good place for our service business, because Tampa, Miami, that area is sort of the end of the road. So they come in with a load, right? And they don't want to do what they call deadhead. They don't want to head back to Atlanta or somewhere and not have that trailer full of stuff. So they're going to stay here until they can get a load. Now that might be one night or two nights, but what happens in that time, we often get those trucks in our shops just to work on them, tune them up to make sure they're ready to go. And there are days that we'll have trucks backed up out on Adamo Drive out there. We almost need a police a cop to do it. And that's a good thing, because what has happened is that a bunch of trucks has dumped in here overnight with a load, and they're not going to get anything for a day and they're going to fix all of their problems. So that's the one reason is very good for us here. You know, the other place is after I got here and got settled in and I got used to people and people got used to me, Tampa's not a bad place, pretty friendly. You know, everybody sort of looks out for each other and things of that nature. I've lived in some other parts of the country where if I'm a dealer and Jim's a dealer, you know, I might try to sell Jim customers and Jim might try to sell my customers. I mean, we just, in our business, you know, people sort of respect each other in that way. So this is where I want to be in terms of owning a business. So.
And Mr. Furman, I'd like to get your perspective as a native of Tampa. What do you think makes Tampa such a great place to start and run a business?
Well, obviously the features that anyone sees, the Chamber of Commerce has a pretty pleasant job when you combine the business climate and the the economy with the amenities. And I also would probably draw the circle a little wider than Tampa because we are a major metropolitan area, and as a matter of fact, much of our businesses are not in Hillsborough County. We're as big in Pinellas County as we are here. But you know, it's one of the largest in-migration locations today. I was chair of the Chamber of Commerce in 1990. The slogan around that time was America's Next Great City, and that was sort of an aspirational dream that really seemed like it was a bit of an exaggeration. But in that period of time, I think there's significant evidence that the eyes of the United States are on Florida and a couple of other states. Texas may have dimmed, metaphorically, in the last bit, but we are an attractive place for relocation, and it's is because of what it offers.
You know, I had forgotten that slogan, America's Next Great City, and I remember before I moved here watching the 1991 Super Bowl and seeing that big banner in Tampa Stadium. And, you know, I think that maybe some people laughed at that during the 1990s, but I think Tampa has shown in the last 20 years that, as you say, through the net in migration, it's shown that it is becoming, the whole Tampa Bay area is becoming a place that people want to be, a place where people want to live and work. So that's happened because of the work of a bunch of people, I think. Now, both of you have mentioned the importance of family, so I want to ask specifically, what role has family played in your development as a business person?
Well, I'd like to say that luck and the good Lord have played a lot of role in that particular aspect. My family, it is a family business, it's owned by a family, and at this point in time, it's capably run by family. And that's not as simple as it sounds. My grandfather had two sons, one of whom died early, so the transfer from my grandfather to my father was straightforward, although partly sad. I'm an only child, so that was an easier transfer, but I have two daughters, and I could not have engineered the fact that they both married people who decided to come back to Tampa, Florida, get interested in the automobile business, be competent at it, and become a succession plan. That's, again, I'd like to think that I could have engineered that, but I know realistically that there were other forces that helped that take place. So a family business that makes it through 4 generations is relatively unusual. I'm glad to be part of it still.
And I'll turn to you, Mr. Horton. What role has family played in your development as a business person?
Well, family has been a big part of it my entire career, and first just starting with support. You know, my wife and kids have followed me around the country, being on jobs where I was gone for a week at a time. And when I come home, all I wanted to do was sleep and pack again and unpack and go out. Coming to Tampa wasn't a popular decision by anybody but me. They didn't really want to leave. We were well adjusted in Chicago and had friends, and we have an extended family that I'm very proud of. So all of that support around it. But family sometimes can be a little bigger than just inherited family, you know. When I came to Tampa, there was a young lady that had worked with me at Navistar. And she was in the accounting side of the business in Inside International. And she heard I was going to go to Tampa. And she said, if you will have me, I'll go down there with you. And she came down, and she's our CFO. And when we got down here, when this thing was leaking oil, let me tell you, without her, you guys wouldn't have invited me here tonight, because I would have been gone a long time ago. And her name is Kathy Hockermeyer. And that's family to me as well. I've got 2 daughters that's in the business today. One work in the accounting side of the business, and the other work in the sales and marketing and operating end of the business. So that's that second generation that I'm talking about as we move forward. So it's the utmost in the process.
I'm going to turn away from business for a second and ask you, what do you like to do in your spare time?
Well, I enjoy reading a lot. Used to read a lot of different stuff, but mostly focused around business. But I found myself in the last 2 or 3 years reading everything I can get my hands on about African-American businesses and entrepreneurship. You know, there's been times in this country where we've had things like our own Wall Street, right, down in Tulsa, and it got destroyed. And there's place after place like that, but I see the resilience in us that we coming back. Reading that stuff keeps me motivated to say, you know, man, because we have a tornado or a hurricane that come through and shut us down for a few days, it's nothing. So those are the things that I read a lot about these days and keep motivated. Got into riding a bicycle just so I could get some exercise. I try to get in, you know, 10 or 12 miles or so a day during the week, and I'm finding myself working toward 15 or 20 on the weekend. I love that an awful lot. You know, golf. I think everybody here tried and played golf, and I tried and played. I have to tell you, I don't play it as much as I used to try, because it's a full day's work to play golf. You got to invest 5 or 6 hours in here. But those are the things that I do, and I look forward to it. And the rest of it is just simply devoted to family time. So.
How about you, Mr. Furman? What do you like to do in your spare time?
Well, it's gotten simpler. One of my quick answers would be my wife and I love to travel. The last year has made that simpler. We just like to go out to dinner. Let's go to Antarctica has been simplified considerably by COVID. But over the years, we do some boating and some traveling, and over the years we've done some snow skiing and some scuba diving, and I think we both also believe that spare time can well be occupied by volunteering for various and sundry things. We've been active in community organizations in a church and Moffitt Cancer Center for Celia. If I can diverge or digress, I would say that one of the things that in my outside activities that I can match with entrepreneurship is the creation of the Florida Aquarium. Florida Aquarium, which celebrated its 25th year this year, was I was privileged to be the chair of it when it was a concept, and to see that concept through design and building and staffing and money raising and filling it with people and filling it with fish and dealing with sometimes negative media and seeing it become 25 years later a centerpiece of Channelside and Water Street. And it took a lot of time. It was a very pleasant, most of the time, entrepreneurial venture. It really was a great entrepreneurship, not just for me, but for hundreds of people that made it come together. So your spare time, I've spent a little bit of my spare time at the University of Tampa these last few years.
And we appreciate that.
My pleasure.
So you've been involved in a lot of different parts of the Tampa Bay area, and you mentioned the aquarium, you mentioned UT. Are there any other organizations, or is there a specific organization that you work with that you'd like to tell people about and what they do?
Well, I probably got ahead of myself on that question by answering the aquarium question because that was important. But certainly we've all had things that meant a lot to us. Meals on Wheels has to Celia. I've been fortunate to be involved in the Art Museum and other charitable events. The United Way has been a big part of both of our lives, and our company is in the top 10 United Way givers in this United Way market, which makes us proud. We take that part of our responsibility seriously and have encouraged not only the financial support of it, but also the investment of people time, of volunteer time. I think we've done a good job of engaging our 1,300 and something team members in the importance of volunteering and the importance of giving back to the community. So we've got a lot of people who volunteer for Little Leagues and for churches and for Tampa Prep and the other worthwhile things that a community offers, and Tampa offers so many.
I'll pose a question to you now, Mr. Horton. Is there an organization that you'd like to spotlight?
Yes. A place called Academy Prep. Academy Prep is here in Tampa. It's over near the Ybor City area. And we have about 130 kids in the school. Right? We take kids in the 5th grade that's reading at a 3rd grade level. We go to school 11 hours a day, 11 months a year, 6 days a week. When those kids get done with the 8th grade, they could sit here in this seat and do exactly what I'm doing tonight. We help see those kids out of the 8th grade into high schools and then on into college. And I'm proud to say we've got some kids here in Tampa that has graduated, and they're lawyers, they're doctors, they're engineers, and they are starting to give back to the school. But what it proved to me is that just because you're in the 5th grade reading at a 3rd grade level, if you don't give up on someone, put your arms around them, give them some structure, give them some discipline, they can turn into doctors, lawyers, engineers. So I know the formula works. I've watched it time and time again. We've been fortunate enough to grow the base. We now have a school in Lakeland that we opened up, and there's one in St. Pete. And we would love to see that model continue to grow. We can only handle about 130 at a time. That's kind of the sweet spot. We certainly believe that 5th grade period is the time to get them. They get much past there, it's a little tougher to do. If you get it much earlier than that, that's a little harder to manage. But that's the love of our family and where we donate on a major scale too. So.
Well, I'm down to my last question, but before I ask it, I just want to remind those of you in the audience and those of you who are watching remotely that you can ask questions as well. Just make sure you tweet to the hashtag SykesHOF21, SykesHOF21. So we're looking forward to getting those questions, but first, my last question. What advice do you have for anyone who wants to start a business?
You know, that's something that I read a long time ago, and it talked about water, and at 211 degrees, water is hot, right? So hot you wouldn't want to put your hand in it. But at 212 degrees, it boils. And when it boils, it starts to create steam. And that steam can power locomotives, and that steam can power hospitals and light cities, right? Just that 1 degree difference can change everything. I think you have to be a 212er. Okay? I know a lot of 2.9s and 10s, and they run out of steam and energy. You have to be able to get up every day and go back at it. No, when someone tells you no, it's actually K-N-O-W and not N-O. They don't know enough to say yes. That's the reason you have to keep at it. So that's the advice I would give anyone. I think you'll figure out how to get the capital. You can get smart people to follow you if you do all of the right things. We have something that we do in our company. I'll show you here. Every employee after 90 days get a coin. Now this is our human resources manual. Right? On the front of this coin it says doing the right thing and win with integrity. On the back it talks about words like respect, trust, ethics, teamwork. Now and I address every employee after 90 days. I have a meeting with them. I said, we've got a human resources manual out there that you can go get, and it may be 200 pages. But if you want to get fired, if we catch you out there disrespecting women and the other race, you can't work here. If you steal from us, there's no discussion. And we're going to know if you steal. It might take us a while. You know, we've had example where people would try to put 50 gallons of gas in a car that's got a 14.5 gallon tank. I mean, you're going to catch that after a while. It just can't happen. So those are the kinds of disciplines and things that I think if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you got to get your arms around some things that you're going to stand for, and you can't let anyone violate it, right? So you do that, and you be a 212er, and I think that things will come together for you.
Good. How about you, Mr. Furman?
I want to be 212 too, Oscar. Thank you. I'm going to go to the concept of starting a business, which is the way the question is phrased. And so, starting a business is you're sitting maybe around the dinner table and thinking, I really would like to have a pizza shop, or I really would. I think it would be great to be in the florist business. I think importantly, you got to figure out why it is you think that would be great. You want it purely to make money. And if you want it purely to make money, you'll be a slave to it. If you have a vision that, hey, this is going to combine a lot of things. This is something I like to do. I like flowers. I like pizza. We can't maybe put those businesses together, but I really would like to do that. Or it's a service I'd like to provide. I'd like to really be able to make life better for some category of potential customers. So I want there to be a reason so that it isn't drudgery. Why pick a business that you just as soon not be in, unless it's sort of a last resort thing. Or if there's some enormous reward that's above and beyond the desire to be in it for its essential reasons. And then once you have that thought in mind, there are a lot of books that tell you how to start a business, but you need to define what success would be if you're successful. And again, I think that should be a balance of things, not just bottom line. It's very important to the extent that you can define risks. Nobody is a good entrepreneur without being optimistic, but being optimistic is not a substitute for being realistic and for doing your homework and for understanding what not only what the risks are, but what the costs are. I think you can easily imagine what the rewards might be, but getting to the rewards is the tough part. And so then, as Oscar has said, enough capital. A lot of people have great ideas and great execution, but before the success gets done, the well runs dry. And so to the extent that you can assure yourself that you've got more than you think you need, that's important. And then I think also no man is an island. And if there's a spouse or significant other or family or others in your life that matter, I think you certainly need to assure, or at least attempt to assure, that there's buy-in. I can't imagine coming home and having somebody be embarrassed that I was in the work that I was in. So again, there are plenty of textbooks that tell you those things, but a lot of those are life stories that once lived are reaffirmed and become really very real and become repetitive in your life. So good ideas are great, but another thing to remember is, and this is an adage that probably many of you have heard, but a good idea is not an invention. An invention is not a product, and a product is not a business. So make sure that, and I've made mistakes along those lines, make sure that the ultimate outcome of what you're doing has a reasonable chance for success, not just reflective of your unrealistic optimism.
And I like the way that you kind of ended this talking about defining success, something you started off talking about, because ultimately nobody else's definition of success matters other than your own. And so that's something that I think people need to remember. I don't really care what other people think. If I feel I've been successful, then that's something that I can deal with. Well, I do think we have some questions on Twitter, which is good. So I'm ready for the first question. What is your advice for a new college grad considering a career in business? Either one of you or both of you.
I'm sorry, say the question.
What is your advice for a new college grad considering a career in business? It's a deep question, isn't it?
Well, you know, I'll just say that answer is probably different in 2021 than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. It's our employment, our economy and its employment opportunities are so vastly different these days. I once invested in a company that I shouldn't have called Interview USA, sorry if you remember that, that visualized a kiosk in a shopping center where you could do a video interview. Well, that was a good idea for about 2 years until iPads and all the other ways that one might do a virtual interview took place. So again, I think there are lots of routes to employment today that didn't exist before, and I would certainly hope that if I were a college grad, I would find that the University of Tampa had a well-staffed and brilliant employment assistance office, and go to it.
That's excellent advice.
Yeah, well, again, I look at myself. I guess I was probably being groomed to be an entrepreneur and didn't know it when I was growing up, right? Grew up in a small town in southern Arkansas, and I would watch people have their own trucks, and they would cut timber and haul it to the local mill. And I would watch families, the entire family would pick cotton in the fall so that they'd have some money during the winter season. And I'd watch people have barbershops, and they were all independent business people and didn't know it. You know? So I guess I always had that in me, and it was just waiting to happen. But I don't remember getting out of college having a passion to go into business. When I got out of college, I had a passion to go and try to make a couple of bucks because I needed to do something with the time and energy that I had invested. And then used all of that time to further educate myself. So I would tell someone that's coming out of college, go get your job somewhere. Learn to run a company on somebody else's money for a while. It's that seed time harvest thing, you know, and it'll come. You know, if you don't have the patience for that, then do something different. But I don't think you can. There's always going to be the exceptions to the rule. But as a rule, I think the best thing you can do is go spend some time in some various companies, various jobs or whatever, and get to see what really works and don't work. So.
I think we have another Twitter question. How does new technology like electric cars and vehicles affect your business?
Well, excellent question. It's hard to pick up a newspaper. Who picks up a newspaper? I'm sorry. It's hard to read a news feed without seeing the electric car business being a major part of the efforts on the part of government and business to perhaps cooperatively try to achieve some of the goals of protecting the climate. I think that electric cars are more currently a goal, an aspirational goal on the part of government than they are a practical part of our business. It certainly may be getting there. I think that the rapidity with which some believe that it will happen is unrealistic. And I think the goals need to be examined, and that is, certainly it's important to electrify, and it will happen, but it's also important to remember that electricity in and of itself isn't a unlimited commodity. Ask the folks in Houston, ask the folks in Austin, ask the folks anywhere in Texas, or a lot of the places where there was inadequate power because of either inadequate mix of production capability or inadequate ability of the grid to function. And so think about someone whose Tesla is in the garage in Austin who needs to go somewhere. Let's remember that generating electricity is clean some places, but not all places. And so the cleanliness of electric cars depends on the source of the electricity. Let's also remember that the production of lithium consumes a lot of fossil fuels, and the shipping of batteries consumes a lot of fossil fuels. So I believe there's still a reasonable future for the internal combustion engine in American transportation, and fortunately it has become so efficient that it's not the polluter that it once was deemed to be.
And I apologize for turning my back on you, but of course, when I heard that question, I had to turn to the automotive guy.
Yeah,
Well, the truck guys are electric too.
Well, I know. So what opportunities do you think that's going to provide in the trucking industry?
Well, the electric truck is alive and well. Okay, I think you'll see some in what we call our city halls within the next 5 years right here in Tampa. Yeah, there'll be some setbacks and there'll be some hurricanes and things of that nature, but you're going to go through a period of 2021. I'm going to say all the way out until about 2030, 35. By 2030, 35, I think trucks will be electric, the medium duty for sure. The long haul truck that you load juice in Auburndale and take it to California, that's a whole nother story. But what's going to happen is that when it gets to 2035, the dealership service bays I have today will look nothing like that, because we 100% set up to work on diesel equipment. The technician I got today will be totally different than the technician that I have. What we're going to have is that messy period between 2021 and 2035. And that's going to be tricky for someone like myself trying to convert a dealership from a diesel technician shop to an electric shop. Okay, that's where. Now, when electricity get here, we're not going to sell near as many parts. Right? Just not as many to go with it. Now, the parts you buy may be a whole lot more expensive, but we won't sell as many parts. We have trucks today that can actually fix themselves as they're running down the road. No, right? We have trucks today that can come through Ocala, and the technology can determine that there's a problem with injector number 3, right? That technology can look into my dealership here in Tampa, our dealership in Sarasota or Haines City, and see if we've got that injector in stock. If not, it can actually route that truck to another location that's got it. That's alive and well as we speak. So what's down the road is going to be mind-boggling. The driverless truck is here. A huge shortage in drivers, just like we do technicians. The toughest thing in that driverless long-haul truck is that I'm not sure society is ready for an 80,000-pound vehicle to go flying by it on 75 and nobody's in it. See? And it really works. It really works if all of the trucks were driverless. Yeah, then they feed off of each other.
The driverless truck doesn't have to take breaks, so you can have higher productivity. Things will get places faster.
Right. So that's all alive and well. I don't think we'll see it on my watch, but it's coming. Yeah.
We have one more question from Twitter. What industry do you see falling off in the next 10 years?
What industry falling off?
What industry do you see falling off or disappearing, I guess, in the next 10 years?
Well, I just have to think around the space that I play in.
Yeah, it's kind of like asking what industry do you expect to appear in the next 10 years?
Yeah, I guess I don't, in my space, we just covered some of that stuff in terms of electric. The diesel engine business will fall off. It will.
That is a good question to ponder, though. But like you say, the diesel industry might begin to fall off or at least go into a period of decline that it might not ever come out of.
Well, what will happen is you'll have fewer companies making diesel engines. It'll be just like I was talking about the dealerships. There'll only be one or two at the end of the day because they'll need all the volume, and the others will disappear.
So then that will have kind of like a domino effect because then there'll be less demand for diesel fuel.
Right.
I would have to echo the same sort of thing. I mean, certainly at some point, efficiency of electric vehicles and legislation that drives fossil fuels away will certainly make some of those businesses go away. The piston manufacturers are going to be in trouble, and the network of parts suppliers who either have to modify or evolve into something else, or certainly not survive in a all-electric transportation world. There's the buggy whip maker syndrome in 2030.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, think about carburetors. Carburetors are something that I don't think my students know what a carburetor is. Or maybe this might be the first time they've heard the word, so maybe they've learned something from me finally this semester. Well, from what I understand, we don't have any more questions, so I want to thank you, Mr. Horton, and you, Mr. Furman, for sharing your insights with us tonight, and for being part of our Sykes Hall of Fame event here at the University of Tampa. So everyone, please thank them. Please join me in thanking them for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Oscar, thanks for being my mate.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, thanks. Enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. We've learned a lot from your presentation tonight. I want to thank Mr. Jim Furman and Oscar Horton and Dr. Britt Shirley for their insights and their expertise. The learning lesson in business is really learning from big guys like you. Thank you very much. On behalf of the University and Sykes College of Business, I'm privileged to present Mr. Furman and Mr. Horton with a memento of this great evening at the University of Tampa.
Wow.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I feel like
In addition,
a
I'd
Super
like
Bowl
to
50.
thank Dr. Britt Shirley as well as WEDU for their time and efforts in helping put together this great program. Our next Sykes Hall of Fame Business Speaker Series will be in February of 2022, and we hope to have that announcement out soon. Good night, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight.